Hello, everyone, and welcome to another reading from On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century by Timothy Snyder. Today's lesson is number 4. Take responsibility for the face of the world. The symbols of today enable the reality of tomorrow. Notice the swastikas and the other signs of hate. Do not look away, and do not get used to them. Remove them yourself and set an examples for others to do so. Life is political, not because the world cares about how you feel, but because the world reacts to what you do. The minor choices we make are themselves a kind of vote, making it more or less likely that free and fair elections will be held in the future. In the politics of the everyday, our words and gestures or their absence count very much. A few extreme and less extreme examples from the 20th century can show us how. In the Soviet Union, under the rule of Joseph Stalin, prosperous farmers were portrayed on propaganda posters as pigs, a dehumanization that in a rural setting clearly suggests slaughter. It was in the early 1930s, as the Soviet state tried to master the countryside and extract capital for crash industrialization. The peasants, who had more land or livestock than others, were the first to lose what they had. A neighbor portrayed as a pig is someone whose land you can take. But those who followed the symbolic logic became victims in their turn. Having turned the poor peasants against the richer, Soviet power then seized everyone's land for the new collective farms. Collectivization, when completed, brought starvation to much of the Soviet peasantry. Millions of people in Soviet Ukraine, Soviet Kazakhstan, and Soviet Russia died horrible and humiliating deaths between 1930 and 1933. Before it was over, Soviet citizens were butchering corpses for human meat. In 1933, as the starvation in the USSR reached its height, the Nazi Party came to power in Germany. In the euphoria of victory, Nazis tried to organize a boycott of Jewish shops. This was not very successful at first. But the practice of marking one's firm as Jewish and another as Aryan, with paint on the windows or walls, did affect the way Germans thought about household economics. A shop marked Jewish had no future. It became an object of covetous plans. As property was marked as ethnic, envy transformed ethics. If shops could be Jewish, what about other companies and properties? The wish that Jews might disappear, perhaps suppressed at first, rose as it was leavened by greed. Thus, the Germans who marked shops as Jewish participated in the process by which Jews really did disappear, as did people who simply looked on. Accepting the markings as a natural part of the urban landscape was already a compromise with a murderous future. Accepting the markings as a natural part of the urban landscape was already a compromise with a murderous future. You might one day be offered the opportunity to display symbols of loyalty. Make sure that such symbols include your fellow citizens rather than exclude them. Even the history of lapel pins is far from innocent. In Nazi Germany in 1933, people wore lapel pins that said yes during the elections and referendum that confirmed the one-party state. In Austria in 1938, people who had not previously been Nazis began to wear swastika pins. What might seem like a gesture of pride can be a source of exclusion. In the Europe of the 30s and 40s, some people chose to wear swastikas, and then others had to wear yellow stars. The late history of communism, when no one believed in revolution anymore, offers a final lesson about symbols. Even when the citizens are demoralized and wish only to be left alone, public markers can still sustain a tyrannical regime. When Czechoslovak communists won elections in 1946, and then proceeded to claim full power after a coup in 1948. Many Czechoslovak citizens were euphoric. When the dissident thinker Václav Havel wrote The Power of the Powerless 3 decades later, in 1978, he was explaining the continuity of an oppressive regime in whose goals and ideology few people still believed. He offered a parable of a greengrocer who places a sign reading, "Workers of the world unite," in his shop window. It is not that the man actually endorses the content of this quotation from the Communist Manifesto. He places the sign in the window so that he can withdraw into daily life without trouble from the authorities. When everyone else follows the same logic, the public sphere is covered with signs of loyalty, and resistance becomes unthinkable. When everyone else follows the same logic, the public sphere is covered with signs of loyalty, and resistance becomes unthinkable. As Havel put it, we have seen that the real meaning of the greengrocer slogan has nothing to do we have seen that the real meaning of the greengrocer slogan has nothing to do with what the text of the slogan actually says. Even so, the real meaning is quite clear and generally comprehensible because the code is so familiar. The greengrocer declares his loyalty in the only way the regime is capable of hearing. That is, by accepting the prescribed ritual, by accepting appearances as reality, by accepting appearances as reality, by accepting the given rules of the game, thus making possible for the game to go on, for it to exist in the first place. And what happens, asked Havel, if no one plays the game? What happens if no one plays the game? Thank you. This is Carter Brooks with This Is Not a Drill, with a reading from On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century by Timothy Snyder. Thank you for watching.